the Waynesboro City Council meeting for November 28th, 2022. Dr. Hostetter, can you lead us the pledge, please?
I'd be happy to.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir. All right, I want to welcome everybody to our council meeting tonight. If this is your first time with us, there's just a couple of ground rules. If you've been here before, you know it. Unfortunately, you got to listen to them again. During citizen comment period, if you wish to speak, there's a sign-up sheet in the back. You can go back there and sign up for citizen comment period. I don't believe we have any public hearings tonight. If you want to speak at the public hearing, there's a sign-up sheet in the back too. If you sign up for either a public hearing or citizen comment period, you'll have 4 minutes to let council know what you're wanting to pass on to us. We'll know the time because there's a timekeeper there. The green light will be on for 3.5 minutes. When it turns yellow, that means you got about 30 seconds left to wind up your what you're trying to convey to us. When it turns red, we ask that you respectfully take your seat and let somebody else come up to the podium. And then that brings us to item number 3. Item number 3 is to adopt the meeting agenda. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the last minutes? Is there a motion to adopt the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Hostetter. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0, 1 absent. And then item number 4 is one of my favorite times of this whole meeting, is matters from mayor. And we've got a pretty good theme going on these days, and it continues tonight, and it may sound familiar to you. This evening we want to recognize 2 of our public works employees who have been instrumental in Waynesboro's recent selection as a Cartograph High Performance Operation Award for 21 and 22, and we've won this award before. Their work involves the application of the enterprise software to the backflow prevention program. This is the 3rd consecutive year that Waynesboro has won this award. So without any further ado, I would like to recognize Danielle Sneed and Chad E. Clem for their outstanding contributions to the city and the application asset management and principles to develop multiple solutions to streamline the Public Works Department backflow prevention program. That's a lot to say right there. Danielle, can y'all come on up? Is Mr. That was it for me tonight. Do we have any matters from council members?
I don't have anything, Steve.
All right, well, I've got my update. My face is back. We're back in green for COVID levels, which is a great thing. And if you look at the Virginia Department of Health site, Virginia as a whole, but then also Waynesboro and the surrounding areas have pretty low transmission recently, which is great news. What is not so great news is flu in Virginia. If you look at the CDC map for flu transmission, Virginia is one of the highest rates in the country right now. So again, common sense, protect yourself, wash your hands. If you're sick, stay home. Flu vaccines are available. If you have not gotten one, I encourage you to do so. Because we know that as people travel around, we're going to see those numbers probably climb in the next few weeks in the month here. So COVID under good control right now, but flu is running hard. So think about that and keep that in mind. The other thing I just want to bring to folks' attention, and now that it is getting dark early, or you noticed it coming in probably, the Public Works folks and the Parks and Rec folks have brought back our holiday decorations. I always love the ornaments on these trees out in front of City Hall, and just a thanks to them to getting things up and running and looking good, as they always do. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hossa.
Actually, I do have a reminder for folks on this Saturday is the holiday market in our downtown, and they'll have vendors and all sorts of snacks and swizzles available for folks, and a variety of vendors. That's from 10 to 5, and then of course our Christmas parade. This and I understand that we may have a special guest at the end of the parade for those children watching at home this evening. So stay tuned.
Will he be
Very
riding
good.
on a new piece of apparatus?
I think you might be writing on a
That's
piece
a good
of
deal.
apparatus, As a matter of fact.
Good deal. Now, I've got to ask, item number 3, did I say meeting agenda or consent agenda when we started
You
this?
said meeting agenda.
Okay. I'm reading this, and I'm like, did I say the right thing? All right, item number 6 is consider approving the consent agenda. Has everyone had a chance to review the consent agenda? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Hossetter. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0, one absent. All right, and item number 7, is Dr. Castle here with us, is to receive a report from Dr. Jeffrey Castle, Superintendent of Waynesboro Public Schools, regarding student capacity and capital projects. Dr. Castle, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mayor Henderson. Welcome. Welcome. Glad to be here, Mayor Henderson, Vice Mayor Williams, Councilman. I believe the ladies who received the award left, and I wanted to congratulate them. We have the pleasure of working with them through the school system in the mouthful of responsibilities that you said to assure safety of our students through the backflow prevention program. They're always very helpful, and we appreciate working with them, as we do all of Public Works and city employees. Thank you for the opportunity tonight. I'll be brief compared to the presentations I generally make to you in the spring. Mr. Hamp, thank you, Dr. Berber. Mr. Hamp asked if I would talk a little bit about building capacity. There have been some questions I certainly have had, some of my staff, and apparently he has had, with the amount of residential growth in the city and what is the capacity of our school buildings. Determining the capacity of a school building is not an exact science. The Virginia Department of Education has some guidelines based on grade level of number of students that you should have in a classroom. The challenge in buildings is, when you encounter older buildings, Berkeley, Glen, and Winona, for example, those buildings were built with just classrooms, full-size classrooms, and not smaller spaces. In the 50 years since they were built in the late 60s or early 70s, we've added many programs, from technology labs, school nurses, special education classes, physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech language, reading specialists, math specialists, English as second language teachers, and many of those obviously require space, but require a smaller space. So we end up dividing classrooms or finding spaces that are appropriate. Newer schools or schools that have had a renovation that involved an addition typically have some of those spaces as well. So you take the number of classrooms, multiply by the number of students that are either preferred or maximum, and that gives you your school capacity. You'll see the note at the bottom. Our preferred class size would be 18 in pre-K, 20 students in K to 2, 22 in 3 to 5, and 22 students in grades 6 through 8. We also calculated a maximum size that generally increases that to 20 students in pre-K. That's the limit that you can have. 22 students in K2, 25 in 3-5, and 25 students in 6-8. Now, you could theoretically pack more students into a classroom than that. I don't list Waynesboro High School because that's very hard to determine a class size. Career and Tech Ed CTE courses are capped at 20 students. That's the most you can have in the class by state limit. The problem at the high school of assigning a number of students is all classes don't fill up. Students make choices based on their electives and the courses they're in or the diploma they're hoping to have at graduation. And so you may have classes of 12 or 14 and other classes of 22 or 24. But we've applied that methodology. You can see the slide, and I won't read it to you. But it does have our enrollment as of September 30th. That's the day that we report our official enrollment for the year to the Department of Ed, and our funding is based on that through March, and then it gets reported on March 31st and adjusted. But you can see the preferred class size by building and the maximum class size that we would have per building. We do have capacity in all of our buildings. The reason I broke elementary out separately is you can adjust the enrollment at the elementary school by adjusting the attendance boundaries, right? Just like you all just did with voting wards, when you had to adjust the voting ward boundaries in order to balance out the voting wards. We could do the same with elementary. Obviously, with one middle and one high school, we couldn't do that. The place that's closest is Waynesboro High School. At about 90% capacity. You'll see K Collins is about 80% capacity. And then I had included Wayne Hills Center for a total. You'll see two totals, one K-12 and one pre-K-12. I did that because if you go to the DOE website or certain other statistical websites, some will report just kindergarten through 12th enrollment, others will report pre-K through 12 enrollment. So you can find different figures around enrollment depending on which of those figures is used. And just a little historical data so you can see the trend. This goes back 11 years when the top school population was 3,200. That declined a little bit, went back up just a little for a couple of years, then declined to around 3,000. We were under 2,900 during the pandemic years, and then we're back over 3,000 now. As you can see from the trend, our enrollment has not varied a large amount as some school districts in the state are incurring either really significant loss of students or really rapid growth. Ours has been pretty steady, all within about 300 students, give or take, on 3,000. Questions about enrollment? I'll talk a little about capital projects. We do have a lot of capital projects going on and are spending a lot of capital improvement dollars. I've had questions about those and how that's funded and what the projects are and what's the plan, so I'll give you a little update on that this evening. At Berkeley Glen Elementary, we are just finishing substantially complete renovation that the contractor price was $4,472,000. That we were getting ready to replace doors and windows at Berkeley Glen because it had the original windows and the building's now 53 years old. We're in just a few days of signing the contract to do that when we learned we would be able to use some federal pandemic funds to replace doors and windows because of air quality. We also needed to upgrade the heating system there badly. So we delayed that bid, wrapped it all into one. This renovation involves new doors and windows, an entirely new HVAC system. In order to do the HVAC, we had to pull the ceilings, so we dropped new LED lighting, put new ceilings in, and outside of this contract, also did some painting and some new furniture and fixings. So it's a pretty complete renovation with the exception of flooring, which is good there. I would call that substantially complete. We're down to punch list and a couple of items that were not arrived because of supply chains, window screens for whatever reason, and some of our control system parts. We have a bid on the street for a very similar renovation for Winona Elementary, again a 50-year-old building, and Wayne Hills Preschool. The preschool had some renovation around 2010 or 11 when it opened as a preschool center, but that was generally one wing, and it was not an extensive renovation. This renovation, the doors and windows at Wayne Hills are good, which accounts for part of the difference, and it's a smaller building, but it will get, in any areas that need it, updated lighting, a new HVAC system for the entire building. Part of the building, the heating's pretty good. Other parts, some days it's a little iffy, and the cooling in none of the building is really a quality cooling system. So it'll be a full HVAC system there as well. You'll see later, we just roofed one wing of Wayne Hills. The other wing was roofed in 2010 or 11 when the renovation took place. That bid is on the street, and we will open bids tomorrow, actually, at 3 o'clock on those two projects. So what you're looking at are cost estimates. 18 months ago, when we started planning for some of these renovations, those were about 20% less than they are now. We've inflated our estimates by 20 to 25% in the last year. And finally, our Phase 1 renovations at Shenandoah Valley Governor School and Valley Career and Tech. We refer to that as a Center for Advanced Learning now, as one school with one director and one campus, but you probably know it as the Governor School and Career and Tech Center. That regional program operates on 25% for Waynesboro, 25% for Stanton, and 50% for the county. That's generally what the attendance at those schools are. There's a $4 million renovation that will be bid after the first of the year, sometime in the early spring, to add some classrooms to relieve overcrowding, and also to replace the boilers, which are original 55-year-old boilers there. It also upgrades the ventilation in the welding department and makes some additional upgrades to some of the other career and tech areas that need to be upgraded to meet today's standards. All of those renovations total just over $12 million. I will say that renovates all of our buildings in the city, with the exception of Waynesboro High School. It's a pretty complete renovation at this point. There's some additional costs at Berkeley Glen. I mentioned we held the painting out of the contract and did that ourselves. We're able to save several $1,000s by doing that. We also did our own furnishings and equipment as needed. At Winona, that's a higher dollar figure because the elevator is being replaced. It actually hasn't worked since spring in several months, and we've had just trouble getting an elevator. They started work there today. The elevator is supposed to be delivered tomorrow after many months of waiting. We've also got money for painting the additional kinds of work you find in a renovation. Wayne Hills Center, again, there'll be some additional costs there for painting and FF&E. At Cape Collins, the intercom and phone system was extended out when renovations and additions were done there several years ago. It wasn't replaced and upgraded, and it's in really bad need of an upgrade to the intercom and phone system in that building. That's one of our top priorities. There's an area of the original building that needs some roof repair. It's not re-roofed, but it needs some repair. The other part of the building, the additions were roofed in 2015 and 2016, so fairly new roof on most of that building. And some HVAC controls that are just outdated. At Waynesboro High School, the cooling system, the chiller, and the chiller tower were not replaced during the renovation. At the time, the architects and engineers were doing the work there and the design work 5 years ago. They deemed that there was some useful life left. That useful life is coming quickly to an end, so we need to replace those. Those projects total just over $1 million. At Waynesboro High School, we have not put a lot of money into athletic fields and athletic facilities in the last several years, with the exception of some Bermuda grass on our football and soccer fields. We desperately need a press box. It leaks. It's just very outdated. It's got a lot of issues. It really just needs to be replaced. Trying to renovate it would cost as much as a replacement. Softball field lights are being installed now. If you've been out Ivy or down Hopeman, the concrete columns are poured, and so softball field lights will be finished within probably the month, certainly by softball season. We are making our baseball field more ADA accessible. It's really not ADA accessible at this point, but will be. And then the same for the softball field. ADA accessibility there with ADA accessible bathrooms and a press box at the softball field, similar to the one at the baseball field. Those projects total just over $500,000. So all told, all of those capital projects are $13,800,000. Don't panic, I'm not asking for money. In fact, that's part of the point, is we're very pleased that we've been able to utilize our federal pandemic funds to accomplish much of this. You didn't hear me talk about William Perry and Westwood in the previous slides of renovations. Those buildings are fairly new in the life of a school building. They've either been completely renovated, or in the case of William Perry, it's a new school in the last 25 or 30 years. That is the life of a chiller system, and we did replace a chiller at William Perry and the chiller at Westwood in 2021 at you can see $500,000 for the two. And I mentioned we've roofed the one wing of Wayne Hills Preschool. I will tell you that all of our buildings have fairly new roofs on them. They're less than 10 years old, so there's a lot of life left in the roofs. Roofing the portion of Waynesboro High School that we renovated, just the 50s and 70s, was $1 million project. We roofed part of Kate Collins a few years ago, and it was $660,000 then, so it would be close to $1 million now. You can spend $1 million or $500,000 on a school roof just about any time you have to do it. So we don't anticipate needing any roof beyond some repairs in the next 10 years. We completed these projects and they're paid for in FY21 and 22, but I wanted you to know that those buildings are at a place that they should not have any significant capital costs in the future. So how did we pay for this? This year, for the first time since pre-recession, I think probably 2010, as I recall, I was assistant soup then in another division and handled the budget. But we used to get some state construction funds. Those went away in the recession, and we have not had those since. This year in the budget, we had $1.7 million of state construction funds that we have to spend by June of 2024. We also utilized part of our federal pandemic funds. We received about $13.7 million of federal pandemic funds. We've used a lot of that, as the city has, I'm sure, for COVID mitigation, for cleaning supplies, for upgrading some air conditioning systems, air purifiers. We've also hired personnel during that time, additional nurses. This year we have additional mental health professionals, social and emotional learning folks to help some of our students who have struggled during the pandemic, and spending a lot of money on remediation as well for the time that students were not in school or were having virtual instruction. But we also used a portion of that, $6.6 million, to upgrade our HVAC systems, doors and windows, and complete construction in our buildings. We also utilized local reserve funds of about $4.1 million. Most of those reserve funds came in FY20 and FY21. In fiscal year 20, we shut down schools in March, actually March 16th, 2020. It's scarred in my memory. So we didn't have any expenses for the last part of that year. That left us with a nice year-end fund balance that went to our reserve fund. And then in FY21, likewise, we did not open school in August. We gradually opened our elementaries and then middle, didn't open high school until second semester. Even then, we were on some limited operations with limited bus routes. We didn't hire substitutes. We didn't have professional development. We didn't have any travel for professional development. So we ended FY21 also with a significant fund balance. We were able to utilize that to match the federal funds and state funds to accomplish the projects that you just saw. We also have SNAP funds from Waynesboro High Renovation. SNAP is the state non-arbitrage program. I'll let Mr. McCormick explain that to you if you have a question about it, because it's pretty complicated. But basically, it's the earnings from the $20 million bond that we had for the high school. And so that money has to be spent at Waynesboro High School, and we'll utilize that on the athletic facilities. So our total available construction funding is $12,967,000. You'll remember expenses were projected out at $13,800,000. Our available funding is, we believe, $12,900,000. We have not signed contracts for all of that work. Those are estimates. But keep in mind, we have to spend most of those funds by September of 2024. So we've got to get started now with the bids that are open tomorrow, and then immediately after the first of the year with the smaller projects to get the architect and engineering work done, get them bid, get materials through the supply chain to get that done. There is a difference there of $860,000. However, we do anticipate that there'll be state construction funds in Governor Youngkin's budget that will come out in December, and we don't know what that is. You'll recall it was $1.7 million for the current year. Hopefully it's that much again. There is state security grant money that can also be used for some of these projects, things like the intercom and phone system, upgrades to doors because of the locking systems on those. And we do anticipate some end-of-year balance from FY22. We'll know that when you get your audit report in a couple of weeks. But we would anticipate having the $860,000 to complete those projects. If not, we'll just decide which projects get delayed. I tell you this because, and I'll repeat, I believe all of our buildings are in a really great place with capital. We wouldn't have believed 3 years ago we were at $14 million to spend. I mean, it was just unheard of. So we feel like we've really used those funds to get all of our buildings in a place where if there's capital needs that exceed $100,000, we haven't identified it. We've basically got all the buildings in a place that they should not need significant capital improvements for the next several years. Having said that, we do have major capital projects on the horizon. Phase 2 of Waynesboro High School with the new classroom addition is very badly needed. We completed the Phase 1 renovation of the 30s and 50s addition during the pandemic. It didn't seem like the right time to come down and talk about Phase 2, but maybe we're getting closer to that now. There is a lot of state construction money that appears to be coming to school divisions in new and different pots of money, not just through the operation budget that I just talked about. There's also a competitive grant part of that. I think it has $500 million in it, $500 million from the last budget, and apparently will be more in the coming budgets. I believe Waynesboro, they've not released the final criteria for that competitive construction grant, but based on what the initial criteria are at the Board of Education, I believe Waynesboro is very well positioned to qualify for grant funds of up to 20% of construction. And then the other part would need to be literary funds, which are, again, being opened up for the first time in about 12 years, I guess, and other funding sources for construction. There's also a Phase 2 at Shenandoah Valley Governor School and Valley Career and Tech that will follow Phase 1 that will be bid this spring, and our portion of that will be 25%. In addition to that, we do need a Winona, and I would put that, these are the top two are kind of first ranked, and then there's a second group. Winona is our only school that has one way in, one way out, and that's not a particularly good scenario, but it's a major engineering feat to figure out a second entrance and exit in and out of Winona to meet all the road standards and regulations that you would have to have. It will not be a cheap undertaking to do that. There is Phase 3 at the high school, which is the athletic addition. Our gymnasium there is not a regulation-sized gym, as you know, but this would contemplate a full-size gymnasium. There's also not a field house for our football team at Waynesboro High School. And so Phase 3 contemplates a new athletic addition that would have a full-size gymnasium, would also have the facilities you would find in a field house that opens out onto the football field and toward the soccer field, and some other locker rooms and coaches' offices, those amenities. Additionally, we need a bus parking facility. For many years, we parked on private property. That contract was not renewed, that they're using it for a different purpose, so we're in search of a bus parking facility. And our maintenance facility needs to be updated. It's very small, just outdated. Again, I leave you with, these are the major capital projects that we see in the future, not things that the building will be $4 or $5 million. Questions or comments?
How far out in the future are you looking?
Well, I don't have a crystal ball, but we need to start work. A very honest answer, we need to start work at Waynesboro High School as soon as possible. If anyone's not, I know you've been in the building, Mayor Henderson, several of you have. If you've not seen the renovation of the 30s and 50s, very proud of that. I think it's very well done. The 70s it's really not an acceptable place for high school students to be comfortable and to learn effectively. It's extremely outdated.
Yep.
Well, I might go in reverse. Should we might put the previous slide up again? So, I think it's to the mayor's question of, in terms of a 5-year capital improvement plan strategy, right? So when you look at, I'm not stressing about in the enrollment numbers because again, the trend lines, you've got a decade of data. And the decade of data indicates something that is manageable, achievable. When you look at inbound, outbound migration patterns, birth rates for the 6-county region surrounding our community, there would have to be a major push from Northern Virginia of folks wanting to move down to the valley in order to see the needle moving, I think, for enrollment in that regard. But I would be interested, I'm very proud of our work on council and collaborating with you all, and also just on the city side of the assets of, about 5 years ago, we said, let's develop a capital improvement plan and let's fund our capital improvement plan. Let's be intentional about it, dedicate revenue for it, and we've been able to accomplish a whole host of things because we planned our work and we worked our plan. And so what I would want to lean in on is, I'm also proud of the fact that we did phase 1 of the high school. And so for those, that need a reminder, the reason we did that was because we needed to address compensation with our school division as well. And so I'm so grateful for your leadership and that of staffs to lean in that regard and be and really make incredible transformative changes to there's always room for additional growth and support, but we've come a long way, I think, over the last few years. And so not ignoring phase 2, I think it would just be important to kind of lean in, maybe get a better pulse on 12 months, 24 months, 36 months of when you see that. I mean, you're already at the 90% right occupancy. So, but it's if I've learned anything about school systems, I'm certainly not an expert, is the secular flow and, the cohort survival of students. And so that would be my request, more of a question. And then I wouldn't want to mention the solar panel, additions to the school division as well. And if you want to speak a little bit to that, I mean,
we are finding very nice utility savings in that. It varies by building. Actually, Berkeley Glen is probably the poster child for that. A couple of months we've had a $7 service charge, and that was the electric bill.
Incredible.
Because they're generating that much. All of our schools are doing not that well, but generating certainly a lot of solar power, which gets sold back to the grid. The one that appears not to be would be Waynesboro High School, but that's because we've only put the solar panels on the renovated part, not on the 70s, which is a significant amount, probably half of the total roof, because building a classroom addition, that part would be demolished. We've had several groups that say it costs more to to try to repair it structurally and renovate it than to build new. So, but we are finding some really significant savings in the solar panels. That's working out well for us. It's also how we know that our roofs are in good condition, because the solar company brought in structural and roofing engineers to verify that the roof had a expected life of 20 years before they put the panels on. And we did roof Winona and Berkeley Glen in order to then install the solar panels. So those two buildings have brand new roofs on them as well.
Yeah. And last night, just an observation about the 1.7. That's great. I knew it was around $1 million, but it's nice to be on the higher end, or closer to 2 than otherwise. And we'll keep my fingers crossed for the construction funds. We'll be anxiously awaiting next month to see what that commitment might look like. And I just want to acknowledge, Dr. Castle, and again, the school division, the school board, Ms. Williams, Ms. Smith, for, I think one of the reasons that we were, and many school divisions all across Virginia, were successful with some of this seed funding for construction and rehabilitation is a result of their perseverance and participation and stretch of making Waynesboro a place to come visit, to talk about capital investment needs and state participation. So I just want to extend my gratitude and thank you to you all for your leadership.
I appreciate that. I might offer, thank you to Ms. Williams and Ms. Smith that you recognize Dr. Barber, Assistant Superintendent, you all know is with us. The other gentleman here is Mr. Dwayne Moore. Dwayne was a teacher for us and returned this past February as Director of Operations. So he is the guy that's on the site every morning at about 7 or 7:30 and then calls me to tell me the issue of the day with construction and transportation. So by about 8 o'clock, he's done more work than some folks do in a full day.
We were glad to still him back in Waynesboro. I tell you, the kids loved you. So
I do appreciate him, especially with all the construction and projects we have going. I gave an answer to Mr. Henderson's question. It's pretty immediate. The thing I would ask all of you to do as elected officials, and anybody in the room who is interested and inclined to do so, certainly the governor's budget will be out in December, and we'll know about school construction funds that will be in the biennial budget for operating. But if you followed Richmond at all, the General Assembly is going to be considering school construction because it's a statewide problem, particularly as you get to western Virginia, west of the Blue Ridge, and farther south or west of us. Some very outdated, very needy. In fact, last summer, you'll recall there was a group visited Waynesboro High on the Crumbling Schools tour. And so there's millions, if not billions, of dollars that the General Assembly is going to be considering for school construction. So I think your point to having a 5-year vision on that is really the point I was making. I'd be happy to start next week, so, Mayor Henderson. But the need is certainly there. And again, I'll extend an invitation to anybody who'd like to come see the building.
Thank you, Dr. Castle.
Any other questions?
Thank you, school board members.
Thank you.
All right, item 8 is to hold a public hearing and consider introducing an ordinance amending the fiscal year 2023 budget in the amount of $7,137,941. Mr. Cameron, I believe this is yours.
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. So for simplicity's sake, this is included all as one item in one budget amendment, one ordinance in your packet, but it really breaks down into 4 components. The largest of which is American Rescue Plan Act funds in the amount of $3.7 million to the CIP fund for the construction of a new fire station. If you remember, during the 2022 budget process, $2 million was set aside for that project, which would bring the total set aside to that for $5,761,000. Item 2 would be the encumbrance roll forward. Most of these are purchase orders that were issued during fiscal year 21-22 that just weren't completed. The only outliers there are for 2 projects, $900,000 for the North Delphine rebuild project, and that is simply a set aside and appropriation for anticipation of bidding that project, and then $268,000 to continue the take-home car vehicle program in the police department. Third main item is appropriation of various grants received by the school board And for fund balance appropriations, for the school board, $458,000 to the regular school board operating fund and $53,100 to the Valley Academy Fund for various school expenditures. And then the final one, which is the smallest, is miscellaneous and other grants and donations, uses of fund balance for $14,000, and that one just didn't fit in any of the other buckets. This will require a public hearing anytime you amend your budget by more than 1%, which for us this year is about $1.4 million. It does require a public hearing. It was advertised on November 18th in the News Virginian, and can be considered this evening and adopted at the next council, or introduced this evening and adopted at the next council meeting if council desires. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them now.
Everybody's shaking their head no. So you did a good job, Cameron. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
All right. I hereby open the public hearing for this amendment adjustment. Anybody sign up to speak, sir?
No, sir.
I hereby close the public hearing for the amendment adjustment. Is there a motion to introduce the ordinance?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Short.
And
Is
I
there a
will second that.
Thank you, Dr. Hofstadter. And then this, any discussion? All right, this ordinance will carry over till our December 12th, 2022 meeting. All right, and then item 10 is to consider appointing Mr. Hashim Halstead to the Planning Commission for an unexpired term of August 31st, ending August 31st, 2023. Has everybody had a chance to review? Okay, any questions? Is there a motion?
Skipping 9?
Yeah, well, hold on a second. Yep. Why don't you go ahead and do these
Okay.
two, and then we'll come back.
Okay,
I think there might be a mistake in your packet. So if you do the two planning commission appointments, and then come back,
to
and we'll
bulk
look at bulk refuse.
did it?
No, I don't think it's you. I think it might be me.
No, I think it's me. We're going to go back to item number 9. Item number 9 is to consider amendment to Chapter 66-4 of the City Code regarding bulk refuse and consider introducing an ordinance. Mr. Hamp?
Sure. So some of the feedback that we received at the last meeting and in the ensuing days was that there was some comfort with a proposed revised pricing schedule in which $35 would be established for a level 1 or a smaller load collection, and $75 for a larger load collection. And again, we retain the pricing differential between refuse customers and non-refuse customers. So there is an increase if you're not a refuse customer with the city in that pricing model. And I think you should have been supplied a revised ordinance. Some of the other feedback, so we had several members of council say that they were comfortable with that or that we were headed in the right direction. We had at least one council member say that perhaps some additional time to review and consider and discuss might be in order. And then we had a council member express, at least one council member express concern about the administrative fee. And so that's the feedback that we received and led to the proposal here. I think if, so a couple choices the council has. You can park the item and have an opportunity to consider and discuss more and consider an introduction at a later date. If essentially we're comfortable with the content, you can introduce and head towards adoption, and that will put, the staff talked about some important timeline and communication and getting the new program rolled out, getting us caught up that are pretty important. But I would say, I would observe from my chair that it's almost equally important that whatever we do enjoys the full support of the council. That's almost as important as doing it in a timely manner. So I think staff is okay if you delay. Staff's okay if you head down the road of the revised ordinance. And I would say also to keep in mind that this is a trial run or a pilot program, and that what we would do is assess after 60 or 90 days and come back and report, or you can report to us either positive feedback you're hearing from constituents or negative feedback, and we can identify items that we've gotten right and items that may need some revision, if any. Having said that, I would encourage the council to hold on to the $40 administrative fee, at least for a 90-day trial period. I think the presentation perhaps created an expectation or an apprehension that the fee will be used more frequently than staff expects. We really feel like that we have a good record of customer service presently. I think it's in the staff's interest and we have a mutual interest in having the program be reformed and be successful and be sustainable. And I think the staff recognizes that liberal or frequent application of the administrative fee probably undercuts that. And I would say that our estimate now is that the fee will only be applied in like 2 and 3 cases a month, that this really is for those customers that we can't seem to get on track with a phone call or a visit and some support and guidance through customer service. And that if it turns out in the first 30 days we discover, wow, we've done 25 or 30 of these things, we'll come back to you and regroup. But I think I would respectfully ask for the opportunity to adopt with a $40 fee.
Any questions or concerns?
Well, one question is, so under provision, let's see, 1B D, any person violating any provision of this section shall be subject to a civil penalty in the amount of $200 for initial violation and $500 for each additional violation. Could you help me understand the difference between a violation of the ordinance and how we would not, for those that need a little bit more attention in terms of course correcting for abuse of the system, why we would not, because my thought with it was Solon and I was the one, right, is to bring it to $20 for customers and $40 for non-customers, understanding that you have a provision in the ordinance which would allow you to execute steeper penalties for violation, an outright violation of the ordinance. Thoughts?
So I think it would be important to hear from the attorney, but from the manager's perspective, that, I can't ever recall relying on the civil penalties portions of codes, and that we really feel like that the administrative fee, if we can't be successful with good customer service, then we rely on the administrative fee. And frankly, I don't know how we would jump or how quickly we would jump to the civil penalty stuff. So I would ask Melissa, what was the vision there?
2 things. One, as Mr. Hamp indicated, the civil penalty is almost a last resort of a full, somebody that is completely non-compliant or consistently non-compliant. And those funds do not go to the city. Those are court-related funds that are directed in, for, other capacities. So none of that money, those violations of the ordinance, comes back to the city or the general fund to allay any costs that the city incurs for having to go out and pick up unscheduled things. So the administrative fund, rather, would be something that the city would be, just like part of your utility bill. That is a different classification that would be funds for the city to cover the city's costs for this program. So they're completely different ideas of one violation of the law versus the city's incurring a lot of costs related to having to go out and pick up things that people do not schedule or do not schedule properly. So that is to alleviate the costs of those. And it's different levels of, I'm a chronic and significant egregious violator versus, I forgot to call and I cannot remember to call and I keep using the system. We start out as the $40, you need to use the system properly versus then somebody who just is running a salvage yard or, has a bunch of junk and everything, it's just a complete egregious situation, would be a violation of the ordinance. It's a level, and so there's two sort of, I guess, levels of why the differences, if that makes sense.
Oh, so what's the differentiation between a civil penalty of $200 and an administrative fee of $40? So we would render the $40 penalty for noncompliance to the customer, existing customer, or non-customer, and in the most egregious of circumstances, subject them to a civil penalty or through the courts for additional $200. So I guess the question is that if they're egregious, why don't we just increase the administrative fee to $200?
Because then that would apply to everyone who's not egregious and who is egregious.
Yeah, I guess that's where I'm at the tier. It's the same thing for the load for the bulk collection of a 5 cubic yards versus something higher and doing that. And I appreciate, staff's attention to that and having a 2-tier system, is that I also feel like from a penalty standpoint for a customer who's, paying for the services and having a tiered system for those that are in, repeat violators are paying for an additional fee and pay the administrative fee. I would like to see the penalty placed on the city side, because I don't know if a $200 hearing is going to be, if we're ever going to get to court on a $200 hearing, on a $200
Well, that's
violation.
what the Virginia code allows. So
Right.
any of, cut grass, inoperable vehicles, that's what's under the city, in the Virginia code. So those are civil penalties for violations of city ordinances.
So what I'm hearing, and correct me if I've got it wrong, Melissa, only if the city would press a charge, essentially,
Which is,
that the $200 or $500 would not be rendered unless the decision was made saying, we are going to pursue this.
and that judge granted it. And part
Okay.
of, their defense, if you will, may be, well, I think it's unfair that I was charged $40 before and now I'm being charged $200, for the next time. Well, why wasn't I charged $40 like last time? That's something that the person obviously could bring up, but it would be the court's decision whether the court felt that it was a violation versus an inadvertent, I forgot to call, or it's a new system, or,
I guess, if it were worded, any person violating, and I appreciate your patience with this, but any person violating any provision of this section may be subject to an administrative fee of $200 and shall be subject to a civil penalty of $200. Is that, why don't we make the most egregious violators, I'm inserting words, so that wasn't in there, that for those that are just repeat offenders, $40 is just, I don't think that's enough, but at the same time, for someone who doesn't know about the system, who.
But I think Mr. Hamp said that they will know about the system because the system's going to contact them and let them know what's going on.
Yeah. Well, I'm cool with doing it for 90 days, and I would love for you to, I'll put on my calendar and try it for 90 days. You know how I can do that. And we can check back in 90 days, see what everybody else wants to do.
I'd be on board for that as well.
All right, so is there a motion to introduce this ordinance tonight?
I will make that motion.
All right, Dr. Hossetter, is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. This motion will carry over till our December 12th meeting.
So, Mr. Mayor, just a reminder, the ordinance doesn't take effect until March. And, oh my gosh, it totally escaped me. Anyway, it takes effect in March.
So June,
90
Terry,
days.
put it in your calendar, June.
Yeah, so the 90-day clock doesn't start until March.
Till March, okay.
Oh, I see what you're doing
All right.
there.
Now, Item number 10 is to consider appointing Mr. Hasim Halsted to the Planning Commission for an unexpired term ending August 31st, 2023. Is there a motion to approve Mr. Hasid?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Is there a second?
I will second that.
Thank you, Dr. Hofstadter. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0, one absent. Thank you very much for stepping up, sir.
Yep.
For those that don't know, our newest planning commissioner, Mr. Halsted, is sitting in the back, and we'll invite him to our December meeting of the Planning Commission. And then item number 11 is to consider appointing Mr. Will Flory to the Planning Commission for an unexpired term ending August 31st, 2026. Is there a motion to appoint Mr. Flory to the Planning Commission for the unexpired term ending August 31st, 2026?
I will make that motion.
All right, Ms. Williams, is there a second? Dr. Hofstadter?
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0, one absent. Mr. Flory in the room? No. All right, and then item number 12 is to consider canceling the December 26th regular meeting of the Waynesboro City Council. Is there a motion to cancel that meeting?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Short. And is there a second?
I'll second.
Ms. Williams. Any discussion? Is this a roll call vote? Nope, okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0, one absent. And then this brings us to communications, correspondence, and calendar. This is jacked up.
So I remembered what I was going to say. With the staff, on good faith, it seems like that we're confident with adoption. We're going to proceed with the unrolling of the communication plan. And so that we'll get that in place and get the catch-up started around the first of the year. So information about the new program will go out in utility bills and coming billing periods.
Perfect.
Thank you. That's all I have.
All right. And then citizen comment period. Do we have anyone signed up?
We do. Mr. Kurt Lilly.
Mr. Lilly, come on forward, sir.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Kurt Lilly, 218 Skyland. You can help me understand this, but I believe that we pay a refuse fee, and we included in that are 2 bulk pickups. Some people would say they're free pickups, but we're paying a fee for them, so I don't see it that way. To me, this increase will just be another tax. I didn't hear why this is being done. Maybe I've missed that meeting and I'm sorry. I think this is going to hit the lower income, the fixed income, and the older people the most, because they're probably the ones without the means to get rid of whatever the item is that the city's going to pick up. Mr. Hemp mentioned a trial run. This was a trial run. And I'm sitting there in shock. A trial run for what? Are we going to raise all the fees? I don't understand what this is about. It just seems like another way to raise our taxes, and so I'm against it. So I hope you will consider that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lilly. All right, no other public comment. Item 15 is to have a closed hearing.
Mr. Mayor, I move this meeting be recessed and that the City Council of Waynesboro immediately reconvene in a closed meeting for the following purposes. Pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A29 for discussions of the award of public contracts involving the expenditure of public funds and discussion of the possible terms or scope of such contracts, where discussions in an open session would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the city. The subject matter of the closed meeting is to discuss possible changes to an agreement with the Sherry Smith Trust relating to the district property.
This requires a roll call vote. Pardon?
Second? I'll second.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Short seconds. This requires a roll call vote.
Mayor Henderson,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Williams.
Aye.
Councilman Short,
Aye.
Councilman Hostetter.
Aye.
We're now in closed session.
Council of Waynesboro has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to the affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. And whereas Section 2.2-3712 of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by this city council that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with the Virginia law. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the City Council of Waynesboro hereby certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting to which this certification resolution applies. And only such business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by the City Council of Waynesboro.
There's a motion to bring us back into session. Is there a second?
Second?
Thank you, Mr. Short. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Roll
We have to
Aye.
roll call.
Roll call.
Oh. Ms. Bortles, I'm taking your job.
Mayor Henderson,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Williams,
Aye.
Councilman Short.
Aye.
Councilman Allen, I'm sorry, Councilman Hostetler.
Aye.
We're back in session. Item number 10, is there a motion to adjourn this meeting?
So moved?
Thank you, Mr. Short. Is there a second?
I will second that.
Thank you, Dr. Hossetter. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0, one absent.